I'm going to take you on a journey through some of the most magnificent scenery to be found anywhere on Earth. The landscape of the British Isles. We'll see great lakes and lochs, climb rocky peaks and mountains, and travel through gentle landscapes too, rolling hills and downland, corners of the country like a garden in flower. I'll sail round dramatic stretches of our coastline, where white cliffs rise like a fortress from the sea. Our love of this countryside seems natural to us. Yet it's only in the last 300 years that we've learnt to appreciate the beauty of our own landscape. It took a group of pioneering artists to open our eyes to the splendor of our islands. It was here in the north of England that artists and writers first began to explore the wilder parts of Britain and to see beauty where before people had only seen savagery. So this is the landscape that changed our view of the world. This is the romantic north, where the art of British landscape was born. The north of England, the scenery that inspired a revolution in the way we think and feel about British landscape. It's not difficult to see why. I'm following in the footsteps of some of our greatest writers and painters to the place where our love of the British landscape began. I'm heading for the Lake District. The Lake District is just a small corner of England, but it contains some of the most spectacular scenery in the country. Artists and poets have produced their greatest work here, celebrating the landscape. One summer evening in the 1780s, a boy was walking by a lake in Patterdale. He discovered a boat, a small skiff, tied to a willow tree. On an impulse, he stole the boat and rowed out onto the moonlit lake. The boy was William Wordsworth, and he was about to experience something that he said helped forge his destiny as a poet. While he was rowing, a strange thing happened to him. A rocky cliff appeared above the horizon, a great outcrop of stone. A he looked up at it, and as he started to row away from it, it suddenly seemed to him to be coming alive, to be getting closer to him, to be chasing him like some animate object. He rowed faster and faster, and the faster he rowed, the more it seemed to be chasing him, until, in terror and his hands shaking, he turned his boat and slipped quietly away, back to where he'd stolen it from. The experience had a profound effect on the young Wordsworth. It constantly came into his dreams. What had happened was he'd seen nature suddenly at its most powerful, its most awe-inspiring, and realized how pitifully small man was by comparison. What happened on that moonlit lake affected his entire life's work. As an adult, Wordsworth settled in Grasmere with his sister Dorothy, living in Dove Cottage. Here he became passionate about the natural world, from the greatest mountain to the smallest flower. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Wordsworth wrote his most famous poem after a walk with Dorothy round the banks of Ullswater, one April afternoon in 1802. As they set off home, they were uplifted by the sight of these yellow flowers swaying in the wind. When the poem was published, some of his admirers were dismayed, even disgusted, at what they saw as his self-indulgence. They couldn't believe that someone with such a magical command of words could squander them on something so paltry, so commonplace as daffodils. What perhaps they hadn't understood was that at the heart of the romantic idea was the notion that any experience, whether great or small, could spark the imagination.
We get an awful lot of people here coming now, and of course they all want to come and see where the daffodils were. People sit there and somebody recites the poem to them, which I find a little strange, but everybody to their own.
So the daffodils are trampled half to death, are they, every summer?
Well, yes, we do get
spring.
We do get that problem with people trampling on them. We do get things like people come and want to pick them. Don't mind that so much, but the ones who come and want to dig them up and take them home so they can have their little clump of Wordsworth daffs in their garden do annoy us a little bit.
What is it about the daffodil that's so special?
I don't know really. It's because it's a little fighter, I think. It's a little yellow flower that pops out every spring. I wouldn't say it's a rare flower in England, but there's not a lot of places where it's still growing like this, where it's grown for, well, we know for at least 200 years on this side.
High on the fells, the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge had a very different experience of the lakes. Unlike his friend Wordsworth, who found happiness here, Coleridge was descending into a kind of private hell. He'd long been an opium addict, and up here he found a new drug called Kendal Black Drop, a mixture of brandy and opium far stronger than anything he'd had before. It gave him such appalling nightmares that he was actually afraid to go to sleep. Hence viper thoughts that coil around my mind, reality's dark dream. I turn from you and listen to the wind which long has raved unnoticed. What a scream of agony by torture lengthened out that lute sent forth. Thou wind that ravest without, bare crag or mountain tarn or blasted tree, or pine grove with a woodman never clomb, or lonely house long held the witch's home, methinks were fitter instruments for thee. Coleridge simply abandoned himself to the lakes, to the fiercest crags of these mountains, to the fiercest weather. He walked, he climbed, and he suffered. He described how his hands would end up bleeding, how his eyes went red with the fierceness of the wind, how he suffered boils, how he got terrible pains in his legs. The idea behind it all was just to expose himself to the worst that the elements could do, in the hope of a kind of salvation, I suppose. We're leaving behind the wild, rugged terrain of the Lake District.